I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the...
Outtakes are done. It's time to start rolling a podcast. Oregon D.O.G.E. Department of Agriculture episode. We got some fresh faces tonight. We got from the House of Representatives, Anna Scharf. Welcome.
Thank you.
Where's home?
Polk County, so I'm about a little bit over the bridge in that direction west. Perrydale, so technically they should say I'm from Amity, but Perrydale, I'm married to a fifth-generation farmer. Nice big family farm area out in the middle of grass seed field.
My next question you've already answered. I was about to say, what's your street cred when it comes to ag?
Street cred is I married into a family farm, but I was raised in a timber town. But I did my stint in high tech and then came back to the family farm, married my husband, 25 years on the family farm, and passionate about ag and protecting our natural resources.
Awesome. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Diane Linthicum, State Senator.
Correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
We just I feel like we were just here.
We were just here.
I love
know. It's awesome.
Welcome back.
Came home. Thank you. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
So I'm from Klamath County. Dennis and I have just a small cattle ranch, 200 acres in Klamath that raises about 20 cow-calves a year. Since we are in the Senate and have been for 8 years, this is our 9th year, running to and from Salem. We lease it to a neighbor, so they bring their cows on and off, and they manage the fences, and it's glorious. So we get the critters, but we don't have the work and the worry. But we're surrounded by ag, by mostly cattle ranches. There's, of course, that area is famous for their potatoes and their onions and all of that in the Klamath Basin. So it was a wonderful place to raise kids. Did all the 4-H things and all that. But we're not, family farmers type folks. We're just, did the 4-H, raised some cows and kids.
Well, hey, Daniel Bonham, I've got 5 chickens.
Yeah,
so
we had chickens
that's
too.
That's my big street cred in this space.
Yeah, but you have eggs. That's all that matters right now.
My
It's
gosh.
true. It's great.
Yeah, we don't dollar cost average the egg. At first, we thought that was a brilliant idea to save from the $8.99 a dozen eggs, and then by the time you build the chicken coop, pay for the chickens, pay for the feed. So we don't talk about the investment. We just enjoy the eggs and the different colors that they come in now.
Yes.
Which is exciting. We get some blues and some pinks.
It's wonderful.
And
Yeah.
yellows. Oh,
Yeah.
it's great. So Daniel Bonham, I represent kind of the Mount Hood region. I live out in the Dalles. So most of rural Clackamas County, rural Multnomah County, and then all of Hood River County into the Dalles. So I have a lot of agriculture concerns in my district. We get a lot of nursery farmers on the west side of my district, and then the east side is fruit trees, cherries, apples, pears. And so I know a lot of people that have great concern with the state of agriculture in Oregon and where we're headed. So we're going to start with a little bit of background on the budget. We got Ben Schimler with us again this episode. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
You got some slides that you put together to kind of walk us through the budget framework, and then we'll get into some discussion on kind of where ag is writ large, some concerns that we have from the legislature, and then kind of roll from there.
Perfect.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go, Ben.
Awesome. So this one's going to be a breakdown of the Department of Agriculture's growth budget, and this has been a recurring theme of growth of government that we've seen from 2011 to 2025, and it's been a significant increase, but not as big as some of our other government agencies by any means.
But even still, if you look at 2013 to 2023, 2011 to 2021, we're doubling almost every decade the amount of investment that we're putting into these state agencies.
It is growing, but the Department of Ag budget, a lot of it is based in fees passed on to the folks that support that department. So whether it's in their weight and measurement department, which I don't think a lot of folks know, but if you pull into the gas station, you look at the gas pump, those pumps are regulated by the Oregon Department of Agriculture, not Department of Motor Vehicles, as the Oregon Department of Ag. So a lot of those weight and measure fees are built into that budget. So those are fees that are collected. So yes, their budget goes up, but they also, their revenue is generated off of that. and some of the fees that they collect for pesticide, pesticide fees for applicators such as my husband and so forth. The farmers, maybe not, I wouldn't say okay with it, but they understand the cost of doing business. So as I said to Ben when I looked at the slide deck when we were talking through it, the Department of Ag is baling twine and duct tape compared to other agency budgets. I sit on human services and subways and means human services, and you look at OHA and ODHS compared to this, and Diane can say this as well. Sorry, Senator Linthicum can say this as well.
We're informal here.
Okay, perfect. Diane
Yes.
can say this as
There you
well.
go.
This ain't nothing compared to them. So, yeah.
But to that point, though, like a lot of users are okay with siloing their expenditures, right? So if I'm being taxed, if I'm being assessed a fee and it's going back into something that helps me, supports me, a lot of people can understand that, right? Like I pay a fuel tax that goes to the roads, and users get it. And they say, okay, that makes sense because the more I'm consuming and the more I'm using, and there's correlation there. But I want to point out that those fees and assessments are still taxes. Ben,
Yeah.
roll to the next slide real quick, because with this agency in particular, you see, how much general fund tax dollars from income tax are going to support the Department of Agriculture. And that top line, though, $90 million of this budget is coming from those fees, those assessments. And at the end of the day, someone's paying for that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
In agriculture, what's unique, what's different, is these folks are price takers. You don't get to build up a cost model and say it costs me this much to produce this amount of grain, and thus I have to charge this much. You go to a global economy, and the price is set by the market. So regardless of what it costs to produce a hazelnut, regardless of what it costs to produce a blueberry, the world will pay what it's going to pay for a cherry, and it doesn't any concern for how much you spent. And so these fees that are kind of wrapped into the cost of doing business for a farmer aren't necessarily fees that farmer gets to recapture.
Wouldn't disagree with you on that. Some of those fees, though, are also fees that are paid on the end of some of the folks that are able to pass that fee along.
Walk us through that.
So for example, a seed company that has to have a license
Yep.
to sell seed inside the state of Oregon and outside the state of Oregon, they would pay a licensing fee. They are able then to pass that along when you go to Lowe's and you buy a bag of grass seed. You're paying their licensing fee. So there are some of those in there, not a lot. But there are some of those in there, the weight and measure fee, for example, in the gas station. So they're passing that along to you on your gas price. There are some of those in there, but they're not a lot. I wouldn't disagree with you, though. I would like to see the Department of Agriculture supported more in our general fund compared to our other state agencies. Because you're right, there are a lot of those fees that we cannot pass on because especially right now, ag's hurting. There is not a single top 10 commodity right now. The top 5 commodities, I went through them today and looked at just kind of where they're at and why they're hurting and what they're hurting about. And the list is long. There's not a single one of them except for maybe cattle. Cattle's doing pretty good right now. Cattle prices are up, but there's not a single one of them that's not hurting. But yet, when you try and squeeze general fund money into the Department of Ag, the governor's recommended budget never, ever looks at putting more money into ODA.
Right.
Never.
But I would wonder if I like the lean and mean look of that. I think all the agencies should get that lean and work as hard as they can to manage what they need to manage in a more efficient manner versus giving them more money and they grow, and what you end up doing is imagining new rules and regulations that the citizens and hardworking folks have to live with and pay for.
Absolutely. So this slide gets a little deeper look within the budget of the sub-agencies within the budget for the Oregon Department of Agriculture and some of the parts. So there's the administration costs as well, but there's the food and safety, consumer protection, aspect, the natural resources, and market access, development, certification, and inspections. So just interesting to see, as we kind of saw in that last slide, where the money portions out. And as is always said, budgets are a reflection of priorities.
So as somebody that's in farming and someone that lives on land, does that breakdown make sense?
Well, I think it's really interesting. The food safety consumer protection is the largest part of the budget. And I think because that's, they're sending out inspectors. I've dealt with that at the local level in terms of, from what's at the county sending out their food safety folks around. It's actually quite ridiculous. I mean, I've run businesses, food businesses, where they come, they surprise you and they come walking through. Then you don't see them again for another 9, 10, 12 months. Yet you're paying a fee and they're driving out and saying, okay, you're looking fine, and it's just a ridiculous system. I think, if you know the story of Colonel Sanders, he started frying chicken at the gas station that he was running because people were hungry when they would drive through the station. And so out of his back kitchen in the back, he made, I'm going to fry up some chicken and start serving it. From there came Colonel Sanders. That freedom is what I imagine, that's actually what built America, is the freedom to imagine and to go with your dreams and do whatever works, without having to go get a license, go get a fee, we all want food safety. But on the other hand, he wasn't out to poison anybody. I doubt, there's very few things that, very few instances where folks would be damaged, I would say, if you give people freedom to do this.
And I would say consumers would not come back.
Right. The consumer the word would get around, hey, that guy's, he's not cooking it enough. He's, doesn't taste good.
So this is leading into the next slide, which is going to talk about the beginning of the end of ag. And I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I've been in this legislature for 7 years, and it just seems like every year we've got a new bill, a new consideration of how to regulate, how to burden, whether it's on the rule side of things, and we're going to restrict what you can and cannot do, or whether it's on the labor side of things, where we're going to force you into a given pay range, or a new consideration. Ag overtime is one that's definitely going to be something we talk about here in a little bit. But in those conversations, every time we present on the floor counter arguments to the new rule, the new regulation, we talk about these numbers here.
Yeah, so on here we have some info from census data, and we can see from 2017 to 2022, we've lost about 5.5% of the farms, lost over 2,000 farms in Oregon, and 667,000 acres of farmland over this period, which is, another over 4% decline in land. And, I think some people might not think that's a big number, but to help put it in context, I've heard a statistic that there's only about, in Oregon, houses on about 1.5% or less of the land in Oregon. So there's prioritizing managing this land. I mean, I don't have to tell anyone here, most of the land in Oregon is public land instead of being resources that help build our economy and grow our state.
And more than that, it's federal land.
Yeah, 50+% of our
50+%.
land.
And, the thing that shouts at you is, okay, we're losing all these farms, and yet the budget is going up for the agency. So they're managing less and less, right? Sadly.
Yeah.
But their budget is going up and up. So
yeah,
that's a problem.
Yeah, you would think, again, correlation, right? That if you're doubling the amount of input that you have to have in terms of budget, in terms of people, that you are doing twice the amount of work. And no, in this case, you literally are managing the same amount of farmland, if not less, and certainly less farmers that you have to interact with, because we have also driven through this process corporatization of farms, right? We have lost the ma and pa grower that has the smaller farm, the local community member that is sponsoring the baseball team, and we have driven consolidation. And the funny thing is we wax poetic all the time on the House and Senate floor about how much we are against corporate entities in the state of Oregon, and yet
Yeah.
our legislature drives
Right.
that outcome.
Right.
by our decisions. Yeah. And this slide is really interesting because I dove into this a little bit deeper in the U.S. Census stuff because I was really interested in where we're losing our farmland and why we're losing our farmland. And the number one counties, any guesses where the number one counties are where we're losing all this farmland at? Gonna put you on the spot.
Washington.
No. Wasco, Jefferson, and Sherman County.
I should have guessed that because of the drought, right? Like, quite frankly, we're losing
Because of the windmills.
access
and
to
the-
water, and we are outsourcing to wind and solar.
So land values have increased. So when you have high valued farmland, it drives it to be sold for other purposes. Urban sprawl, so inability to operate in the shadows. So it makes it harder to farm when you've got stuff butted up against you. Critical mass. So this doesn't really affect them, but critical mass. So we've lost our canneries. We've lost all of our food processors in the state of Oregon. This is really more of a valley type thing. So why aren't we? Everybody says, oh, we don't grow food in the valley anymore. That's why we need all these hobby farms. Well, you can't grow corporate size farming food anymore because we don't have anywhere to take it. But also it's conversion of land and water for other uses. So think data centers. What do we have in Sherman and Wasco and Jefferson County? We've got data centers, we've got solar fields, we've got wind, we've got all these other things because it was considered quote unquote low value farmland that they could snap up for less than other stuff and convert it. So those are, I was shocked. And in full disclosure, we have one of the oldest wind farms in Sherman County.
It's funny because Ben just said it, right? That only 1% of the state is truly developed
Yeah.
in housing, residence, development. And yet, in my mind, as you asked the question, I was picturing, Washington County growth out into the Hillsborough area, the Max line coming out and the 5-story, town hall condominiums with the commercial basement. And yet, after you gave the answer, clearly
Yeah.
it was like, oh, man.
Yeah. When I first got elected to the legislature, I went on a tour with a bunch of freshman legislators. It was actually not when I first got elected, but when I first got actually officially elected. Went on a tour to ODA with a bunch of freshman legislators as orientation. And one of the folks at ODA was asking questions of all of us. And they said, okay, who in the room can tell us where the best soil in the state of Oregon is? And I thought, oh man, I know the answer to this question. And I shot my hand up and I said, St. Paul. Because my father-in-law has always told me St. Paul's got the best dirt in the state of Oregon.
And your father-in-law would not mislead you.
He would not lie to me, but he had. He lied to me. I was really disappointed. It's not. And I was quickly corrected by the Department of Ag. At the time, it was Jim Johnson. And the best soil in the state of Oregon is on the east side of the Willamette River in Portland,
Really?
covered over by asphalt and buildings. The second best soil in the state of Oregon. We sit on it every day. It's on the east side of the Willamette River in downtown Salem. So we've already gotten rid of our best farmland in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is a common thread, though, of concern and care, right? Like the far left and the far right, and everybody in between care about sustaining our beautiful state and natural resources, right? What's always been fascinating to me is the relentless assault on farmers as if they're not good stewards of the land.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which farmer wants to abuse their land today to not be able to grow a crop tomorrow?
You mean like the oxymoron statement of sustainable farming? Have you ever met a farmer who didn't want to sustain their business?
Right. Right.
Right? It's like,
Yes.
stop.
Yeah.
So here on this slide, we see some information about the net cash income by operations. And this is an interesting one. These next few slides are going to compare Oregon against the U.S. averages. And so you can see average dollars per operation and some breakouts over some years. And we can see that the income in Oregon is not so great compared to nation averages. So, and I think, we could talk about a lot of those impacts from have issues facing the market and the economy, but you can go into everything from the cat tax to recent ag overtime rules. I mean, anything in between. We can see
Income tax burden.
income tax burdens, all those squeezes that are hitting our farmers in agriculture. And I think Rep Scharf, I'm sure, could speak to it.
I love that $26,000. That's those rich farmers right there. All those rich farmers with all those employees that they treat like garbage.
Right.
Yeah, $26,000 a year. We're getting rich on that.
And so this is average net cash loss. And again, we can see we're leading the way compared to national averages as time has moved on. But again, hitting your note of all these rich, greedy farmers. And here's a good one that I imagine we'll talk about later too, even more so. But labor expenses per operation in Oregon. I mean, just, all of them. There's no good year compared to the national averages. And, as we continue to see the demand for more regulation and how those impacts hit our farmers and those costs and expenses, and again, how you can't really recoup that, right? You have to operate in the market, the set prices that are there. And so here's another one as labor as a percent of total expenses. Again, Oregon leading the way.
And a lot on this slide, the interesting thing about this slide is a lot of the crops so Oregon has over 220 crops that we can grow here. The blessing about Oregon is we can grow literally everything. I mean, my district has kiwis in it. We have everything in my farm grows 11 different crops, and my district probably grows way more than that. There's kiwis in my district. But when you look at the cost of labor, a lot of that has to do with the fact that, and this is true also in Senator Bonham's district, it requires labor. You can't machine harvest a lot of the things. You can't machine harvest cherries. You can't machine harvest strawberries. A lot of these things haven't been mechanized yet. And so we drive up our cost of labor because of the fact that we are expensive in our labor in our state, and you cannot mechanize it.
And so go back to this list for half a second. So again, comparing it nationwide to the other U.S. states, I mean, there are certainly some crops that can be mechanized, right?
Yeah.
And when you grow more than 220 different crops, as we do here in Oregon, some things are more labor intensive than others. It is somewhat relative to the crops that you grow. And yet, if you look at those 4 slides back to back to back, you see a story. It's beyond just this one slide that, labor costs represent 21% of all expense here versus 10% across the nation. But compound that with the 3 previous slides, and who wants to be a farmer in the state of Oregon? Like, you literally are a multi-generation. You're born into it. You have agreed to a lifestyle through birth. But there's a value set there. There's something very noble about being a farmer. There's something inherently valuable in producing things for society that benefit society, right? Like there's a lot of integrity in doing this work, and yet there's not a lot of equity.
Yeah, and there's a lot of romance around the Western cowboy, and that's what we're surrounded by. Cattle ranches, and we have cattle drives down Highway 140 going from our property to our neighbor's property, and people love it, right? But yet these people, they're working hard, the family's all involved, and they're not remodeling their homes. They're living in the home that granddad built, and
Right.
they're plastering it together and stapling, and everybody's out there putting that new coat of paint on. But they love the lifestyle. And they know that it's healthy, it's keeps their family whole and happy, and that's worth $1 million, right? But it would sure be nice if the state would take the boot off their necks and let them actually just run their business, because it is a business. they run cattle on our place, and they have to, since Obama put in the over $600, you have to send out a 10. So it's one more thing, 1099, that they've got to do because they lease our little plot of land, and it's ridiculous. Those are just little idiosyncratic burdens that we put on them, whether at the federal or the state level, that are unnecessary and just add to, the paperwork they've got to comply with.
So Anna was talking about going out and having a tour, right, with other freshman legislators. One of the challenges I think we've had is getting legislators in Portland to understand that there is no cow in the back of Safeway. Like the milk is not produced right behind the shop. The cheese isn't produced right behind the shop. That there are people out on vast amounts of land producing the good, processing it through a local processing plant that then has a truck that brings it to you. Like there are so many inputs that gets to the point before you see it at Safeway or Fred Meyer. I don't mean to be exclusive to one.
Costco. That's right. Amazon.
Winco, wherever you're shopping, Trader Joe's, I don't care where you shop. But at the end of the day, like there's a lot that goes into it before you see it in your grocery store. And there does seem to be a disconnect when you're legislating and people are starting to pick apart a different factor within that supply chain to say, we need to fix this problem, and that there's no correlation then to say, okay, well, what's the cost going to be on the back end? And the cost on the back end will impact consumers because what happens if it's a commodity, right? Let's just say that you don't get to set the price, but you will either stop growing that product and start to try and produce something else, in which case, as the ebbs and flows of supply and demand happen, the price will move. And then the cost too, if it's not produced locally, to get it to market. That's why the externalities of leakage within the supply chain conversation on like carbon capture. Like we don't want to produce asphalt here in Oregon or cement here in Oregon. Well, the supply may not be here anymore, but the demand certainly is. And so I keep using the same example, but do you want China to produce it with their coal powered plant with no regulatory environment over what you can emit while you produce the good, and then put it on a seagoing container vessel and ship it clear across the Pacific Ocean to get to the market?
Right.
What is the cost now to the globe in terms of your carbon footprint? Wouldn't it be better to have that production here in Oregon? Wouldn't it be better to have the jobs here in Oregon and the tax base here in Oregon and the income here, like all of that to produce what income back into the community? You can tax that income now and you can provide the community services that you want to as a legislature. I don't know why we have this attack on agriculture and industry writ large.
But I don't think, I'm going to disagree a little bit because I think we don't on one sector. So I think we have educated our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are thoroughly convinced that the only ag sector that we need is the small ag sector. And that we can feed all Oregonians with small ag sector, meaning farms that are less than 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 acre farms. So we pass bills like House Bill headed your guys' direction, House Bill 2979, and we give $3.5 million to the Oregon Community Food System Network, and that gives out grants only to small farms, not my family farm, but small other family farms, so that they can shore up their farm, shore up their ranch, because they're seen as more valuable. Or $2 million in the same bill for food hubs, for regional food system infrastructure, for whatever that means. And $2 million in the same bill to Oregon farmers markets, because Oregon farmers markets are better than the quote unquote family owned corporate farm that produces food, by the way, and ships it out of state or out of the country. Or $500,000 for farmers markets to help cover the costs of supplemental nutrition programs. So we and we'll talk about water in a little bit. So I was on a farm tour with some colleagues on the other side of the aisle and colleagues on my side of the aisle, and we were at a dairy, and it was a sizable dairy that actually is still in business, one of the few. And the comment was made that maybe we need to define what is a corporate farm and what is a small family farm. And Representative Bosshart Davis actually had to hold me back at that point in time because 97% of the farms in the state of Oregon are family owned and operated. This was a family farm, but they're a corporation as well because you incorporate to protect your assets, right?
Of course.
And my thought process was, well, what's the definition of a small farm? And so several weeks ago, I had friends and family farmers in my office, and I asked them, what is your definition of a small farm? And their definition was 10 acres or less. So farms in the state of Oregon that are 49 acres or less are actually only contributing about 3% to the overall ag economy in the state. So if that's what our colleagues want to focus on and that's what they want to put their revenue to, then we are cutting off our arm, our nose, our leg, whatever it is, to despite our face, however that saying goes.
Our nose.
Whatever that is.
Cutting off the nose.
But
despite the
we're
face.
throwing away a $6.7 billion industry in this state because we think that we can feed Oregonians by just that.
Right.
Instead of convincing them that, no, there isn't a cow in the back of Safeway and there isn't this in the back of the Safeway. And by the way, I went to farmer's market last week and all I could buy was flowers and $11 zucchini bread. So we need our quote unquote large farms and our small farms. We need all of our farms.
Right. The government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers. This is the age-old, very simple truism.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing with what's in that bill.
And many others.
So here's one to talk about, and this is honestly a reflection, we can even say, in some of those labor costs of just ag overtime. So this is from House Bill 4002 from the 22 session. And a recent study from Oregon State University found some of the impacts of ag overtime. And I'm willing to bet that it was not a surprise to anyone here. But some of them include a decrease in weekly work time for these employees, a reduction of approximately $75 a week in wages. Dairies had a projected labor cost increase of 7% at the 48-hour threshold, 12% at the 40-hour threshold. Nurseries estimated 4% labor cost increase by 2027. Cherry growers expected 3.3% increase this year, rising to 6.3% by 2027. As we saw by all those numbers earlier, those margins are not good either, right?
Well, this echoes to a study that was done in the state of California, study from Cal Berkeley, not exactly a conservative, think tank, but they suggested it's $100 a week in lost wages to the employee. So again, in the name of helping the employee, we have screwed the employee. We burden the farmer. The farmer's now having to figure out how to work either to mechanize it to the extent that they can. They've got to automate. They've got to figure out a way to reduce the labor burden, or they're sharing labor, right? You got to work for farm A for 3 to 4 days a week and farm B for 3 to 4 days a week, which is putting more of those employees on the road, more people having to travel, more people risking their safety in that process, which is nuts to think that they could be, locally working for one consistent employer, which they prefer to do. The amount of people that were burdened with this in my neck of the woods, people that grow cherries, people that grow apples and pears, and they're used to piecework, folks coming through that are happy to get paid by the amount of productivity they have. Yeah. And this is kind of throwing some of that stuff out the window, and we're limiting and capping hours for fear that, we're going to hit this threshold that you just can't afford. And we're already, again, this is what just kills me, is we're already at the high end of the market nationwide. And it's not good enough for the local advocates that just have to have a political win. Like this really isn't about embettering people's lives. This is about a special interest group wanting to say, I passed a bill.
You have to ask the question, what was the goal? What is the goal to all of this? Is it to help the worker? Obviously not. They just got reduced in their wages and hours that they can work. We've got a very large dairy in Klamath County. The folks that work there love this family dairy. I mean, he would come to my little espresso stand in the neighboring community and buy all of his workers coffee on, Tuesday morning. Come on, guys, it's time to go get coffee.
Yeah.
And they're happy. They're raising their families. They're going to the local schools. A lot of them also we have seen them work through their citizenship. So they maybe started out illegal. They love America. Their kids are doing well. It's been a very healthy system, and it was heartbreaking for this dairy to have to lose some of these workers. But the workers could not survive if they were going to have their wages cut. But the dairy can't survive, to continue paying those wages. And so it's a rock and a hard place.
The most painful part of this conversation, and to just cut to the heart of the political issue, is farmers are racist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we heard time and again. And yet when you go out to the farm and you have the orchardist introduce their foreman or their manager, and that foreman says, my grandfather started working for this family,
Right.
60 years ago. My dad works for them. I've worked for them. Yeah. And in that time, they have helped us buy our own land. And we now have our own orchard, but we continue to operate and function on this one because they're family. Mm-hmm. We are now family, despite the fact, yes, I'm their employer, or they're my employer and I'm their employee. And when you watch the relationship, you say, how could anybody think that this is driven by racism? And yet that's what we heard this entire debate in Salem was, if you think that an agriculture worker doesn't warrant overtime, you are a bigoted, racist.
Slave owner.
Yeah.
Right. Slave driver. Yes.
Yeah. 2022, I was very fresh. And thank you for all the time that you and Representative Bossart Davis spent working in this committee. I've now had a taste for what you had to go through with this committee, because there was a special committee just for this bill in 2022. And the things that you guys had to sit through, I can't even imagine. But I got to deal with it on the floor. It was the very first time I cried on the floor of the House. I don't think I'll ever live that down. But my speech on the floor of the House said one thing, and that was that what this bill doesn't do is this doesn't reduce the hours it takes for the work to be done on the farm.
Right.
And what it did do is the work on the farm that had to get done was now put off onto my husband, my father-in-law, and my children. Because when your name's at the end of the driveway, that doesn't apply to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It still has to get done. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what's happened. Our 20 employees have had their hours cut. They don't want their hours cut.
No.
They loved their overtime. They love their jobs. Most of our employees, on average, they've been with us for 16, 17 years. Just like you said, their family, a lot of them are their own families. I like to say we have the Hatfields and the McCoys, but they're the Morenos and the Moraleses. This bill was not for them.
But it was in the name of helping them.
Oh, absolutely it was.
And super condescending, super rude to take somebody's livelihood in the name of helping them. Right. And again, so here we are in the back end. We've seen the UC Berkeley study. We've seen the OSU study. I have not read that one as thoroughly as I've read the UC Berkeley one. Berkeley one has those first-person testimonies. The person that worked and said, I literally am making less money today. Like, this did not help me. And yet some people are questioning, I want to know the validity of this study. I want to see the details of it. And so our question right now, I was with Representative Bossart Davis. Shelley and I were on the floor the other day talking to a few members saying, here's this document. Do you care that the people you said you were helping are earning less? Do you care? And if you care, what are you willing to do about it? And the political will to stand up to the special interest groups is just absolutely lacking. And we've honored Peter Courtney quite a few moments during this session. in the Senate. And one of the things that I always admired about Peter, and one of the things he was very clear about, is if you can't tell your top donor, your number one supporter, to pound sand, you don't belong here, right? If you can't stand up to the political activists, then this business isn't for you. And yet right now, we are being driven this session by a political will to pay back favors to the labor unions.
So there was it went to Ways and Means. It didn't come to Labor in the Senate, but it came through the House Labor Committee, multi-million-dollar reauthorization. It was $10 million this time. And the testimony that we heard in the House was mostly from Piccoon members. And the gist of the conversation was that we lost hours because of smoke, or we lost hours because of heat. But then there was testimony that we lost our hours because our employer cut them because of ag overtime. And we need this $10 million fund to backfill our lost wages. And it went out on a party line vote to Ways and Means. So you can't tell me that we sent this nonprofit organization $10 million to shore them up because of that.
Right.
We did.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's got to get through Ways and Means, but yeah.
We're trying to.
I'll send you the bill number.
So here's a little bit more info on that, just the labor costs for organ producers specifically, a little more broken down into the product specifically. And just, you touched on this earlier of how certain technologies have really not caught up necessarily and made those labor impacts difference. And you can see it shown very clearly here. And then we see more ag impacts. So this was measurement of profit losses in certain economies right around the COVID window. And, you know, there's other parts referenced allegedly in this measurement from severe weather, COVID-19, regulations, trade relations, labor shortages. And so you can just see how some of these industries were impacted with significant profit losses and what percentage of the market of each of those shares. So again, pretty staggering numbers, especially. And so this one I know is near and dear to you, Representative, with the House Bill 2548. And this one's the the Agricultural Workforce Board. And so this is a bill that was going to prohibit employers from firing workers without cause. And, you know, this is something that we've heard you guys talking about in here about the impacts for labor, cutting those costs and trying to find a balance to keep these farms sustained. And we've often heard about, you know, these experiences where agriculture workers aren't protected, but I included a little list about some of the protections already in place for some of these workers. So we have minimum wage, pay equity, overtime pay, rest and meal breaks, sick leave, family leave, milk expression rights, unemployment insurance, organ saves retirement options, heat exposure regulations, wildfire smoke regulations, work or farm worker housing, the right to refuse dangerous work, the ag stress hotline, and even more that I just couldn't include for lack of space.
So 2548 is actually currently sitting in rules. I firmly believe that they sent it to rules to punish us or to hang it over our heads to see if they can get us to vote on some tax bills. But 2548 makes ag overtime look like child's play. If they're able to push this through, it's actually being pushed by the same advocates that pushed ag overtime. It will include ag overtime. It will include minimum wage. It'll include all the things plus some. It takes every single state agency regulation and puts it into a non-government board that will be accountable to nobody. So they would be able to regulate hours, days worked, rest times, meal times. They could literally tell my farm that, no, you only can work your farm workers 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, break for an hour. You'll pay them $20 an hour. You'll pay them overtime at 40. You will train them this way. You can't have them work in this situation. I mean, it's the workaround because Piccoon was not able to unionize. This is my opinion. Piccoon was not able to unionize individualized farms, and so this is the workaround to be able to unionize all farms in the state of Oregon without having to individualize unionization of
that.
farms.
I think you're right. I think you've got
They
something
could
there.
get the state to do it for them.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the ugliest bills in all the years I've been involved in the legislature I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's bad.
What is Paccoon?
Paccoon is
Or who is?
who is Paccoon? Paccoon claims to represent migrant farm workers in the state of Oregon. But I have yet to meet a migrant farm worker in the state of Oregon that I know that works for any of the farms that I know that actually likes them. So they are, I'm not really actually sure who they are, Senator, but they are happy to parade people into the labor committee for 3 hours and call me a racist
So it's some type of nonprofit.
farm owner, slave owner, all kinds of things. But yet they won't let me ask them who they work for and if they filed a bully complaint and can I please go after the people that violated their existing laws.
Yeah. Piñeros y Campesinos Unidos del Noreste is Paccoon. It is a farm worker labor group. Sorry, I asked a question I knew the answer to, but
I don't speak Spanish.
You use the acronym, and I just don't know that people watching the podcast would know what it
No.
was if we didn't
Yeah.
explain it to them.
Right.
Because that's exactly what happened when Paccoon came out to Hood River. We invited the Senate president. We invited Andrea Salinas when she was still in the House before she went to Congress. And when they came out and they mentioned Paccoon to the local workforce and the local farm employers, neither had any idea who Paccoon was. And yet we were doing all these things in the name of Paccoon and the laborers that they represented that all live in Woodburn and Silverton and like not anywhere near where I live. And yet they were driving this conversation. One of the interesting things, like we have overtime on there, we have minimum wage on there. These were multi-session, interim work session, interim work group, multi-year endeavors to get to the point of consideration, let alone final vote. Right? Like these were things that had negotiations back and forth, give and take, stakeholder meetings. This particular bill, I knew nothing about.
Nope.
I've served on labor and business for the last 6 years. I didn't even realize that this was a thing until we were a month into session. And I knew that there was another labor standard board being considered for long-term health providers. Like I knew about that one. That again had no real work group, no stakeholders. It was just a movement from the labor union to say we want this, and this as well was a movement from the labor union to say we want this. And I'm not surprised that in 2025, a session that will go down in history, I'm sure, as paying back political favors to labor unions. That will be the theme of this session writ large. I'm not surprised to see it. And yet I think most people sitting at home that only casually watch the process, they don't understand that a lot of the things that we pass really have been multi-year endeavors. A lot of give and take, a lot of different perspectives, stakeholders, proponents, opposition, sitting in a room trying to say, do we agree that there's a problem? Do we agree what the problem is? Do we agree on some proposed solutions? Here's what we think. Here's what we think. Can we compromise? And a lot of that work can take place expeditiously. It's not that it can't, but this has had none of that.
No. There was nobody on the other side of the aisle on this. In fact, the week after we heard this bill in committee, they did form a work group. And the work group met with the governor, at the governor's pleasure. Well, I shouldn't say it. The governor's office was involved in the meeting. But the chief sponsor on this bill, Representative Valderrama, hosted this work group. And farm groups were represented. The farmers were represented at that meeting by Friends of Family Farmers. And Friends of Family Farmers support this bill.
So again,
I will say, I'm a family farmer,
Yeah.
and Friends of Family Farmers ain't a friend of mine. Farm Bureau, who represents the vast amount of farmers, not the 3%, were never at the table to represent. Wheat was never at the table.
Yeah.
Nobody was at the table to have this conversation.
Which just proves the point. Anybody can make a political action committee and call it whatever they want. They can have a mission statement that says what they care about. And the hard part for people back home is whether or not they have the time and the energy and the resources to figure out who's who.
Yeah.
Right? On any given topic, you can have 3 different political action committees that say that they care about the same thing with completely different political agendas.
Right, right. I mean, to look at this, prohibit employers from firing workers without cause.
Who doesn't
Like,
want all that stuff?
This is ridiculous. This is already what happens in real life, as well as the protections already in place for workers. Overtime pay, rest and meal breaks, like if sick leave, family leave. All these things. We've got the bill in the Senate that's coming on the floor regarding breastfeeding, and
It's already up there.
Yeah.
right, yeah. But this is I can't remember the specifics of it. But it's just to allow someone to have a certain, air-conditioned special spot for breastfeeding within, it's super crazy, within like 13 weeks of having your infant. And, they're
Well, it's for the seasonal worker. So we've established that you get it if you're a year-round worker, but we haven't established that you get it if you're
Right.
there only
Right.
for a harvest window.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is what we've been begging for the whole time, is some harvest window allowance. When the fruit comes due
Yeah.
on the tree, you have to get it off the tree. And you only have a certain amount of time to get it off the tree or it goes bad. And so we have been begging for a consideration since this overtime conversation started,
Right.
that you allow for a harvest window where people could work upwards of 56 hours a week,
right.
8 hours a day for 7 days a week, just for that short window of time where you don't have to get burdened by overtime, but that you can get the goods off the tree, out of the
Season
ground.
exemption.
Yeah, a harvest window allowance, a HWA.
Yep.
Well, and when
they-
you
they
have
love
these
their
things,
acronyms.
And we couldn't get it.
Yeah.
But we're going to get it for breast milk exemption.
well, and when you're saying the women who've just had their babies need a space, we're going to make it a law that they need a space. What that says is that those farmers, ranchers, producers are not providing that now, and I would argue vehemently against that.
Right.
That is not reality in the farming space, because they're family, they're people. We care. They're people. They're helping us out. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that they're doing well. Have what they need.
But I do wonder too, like what's next, right? Like you see
Well,
this
you
long
do
list
wa-
of
yeah,
things.
you have to wonder.
And I remember when we were talking about paid leave, Oregon, they said what's next is paid daycare, right? We're going to come after paid childcare.
We should just
No, but they told us. They said that's what's next. We're going to come after that next.
It will be.
But you've got this list of things that you have achieved for workers writ large without the need to have a labor union.
Right.
So we have unionized a collective bargaining agreement statewide through legislative process, through statute. And yet I'm sure that these folks are out pitching, saying, join our labor union, join our labor union. And quite frankly, you've already delivered on everything that most people want. Again, there's not much left on the list. I remember Barbara Smith Warner, who was then House Majority Leader, had a press conference pre-session after we had passed the paid leave law and said, quite frankly, I don't know what else we're going to ask for. Like, we're really, we're getting everything we want. And we were like, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be nice if you just did take a break
Yeah.
and quit piling on more burden, more regulation, more cost pressure onto every business throughout the state, but specifically our agriculture sector.
Well, sorry, Diane. I think that I hate to say this out loud, but we've been able to get small business, not just ag, we've been able to get small business exemptions on a lot of things. So employers under 25 have been exempt from a lot of things that we've done in the state. And that's what I'm seeing come next. I think they're going to come after a lot of this, small business exemptions. But we still don't have mandatory retirement plans in place yet. We still don't have a couple of other union benefits, which I really don't want to mention because they'll come after those. But you're right. Absolutely, you're right. They're piecemealing unions together on private sector employers which drives out competition from the private sector, because the reason that I have a hard time hiring is my jobs are hard. My jobs are hard to do. And when you can make more money standing around in a coffee shop making a latte than, or working at a tanning salon where somebody comes in every half hour to tan, then you can sacking seed in my warehouse. Why would you come to work for me? Well, the reason you come to work for me is because you don't have the skills. You can't read, write, speak English
Right.
to get those other jobs. That's the reason you come to work on the farm.
Yeah, it's the age-old stepping stone. The other thing that I would mention is all of these things that they legislate into place. How are this all raises cost, and then it raises the price at the checkout stand. And these folks who are doing this work, receiving this overtime pay, rest and meal breaks, sick leave, family leave, all of these things, now they've got to go to the grocery store and pay that much more for the food. It's this cascade of problems that we create with this type of legislation. That it's kind of the unseen, you know. It's not.
And a lot of those things they don't want necessarily.
No.
Like the whole forced insurance thing. I mean, my employees, several of them, they're married and they get good insurance through their spouse. I mean, you know, they come to work for me because they necessarily can't get jobs, whatever, but they love what they do. They're great people and they love what they do on our farm, and they have benefits through their spouse. They don't want me to force them to take my insurance or force them to take other benefits they don't want.
But in this day and age, too, this is the hard part. How many employees, quite frankly, want the autonomy to make that choice for themselves?
Yeah.
My employees, right? Hey, we've got this Obamacare mandate. I've got to supply you health care. And they'd be like, how much is that going to cost you? And I gave them a figure and they said, can't you just give me that amount?
Yeah, they just want the money.
I'd rather have the
my
money.
paycheck.
Yeah, quite frankly, I'm 28 years old. I'm perfectly healthy. I don't need to spend my money on that. I'd rather spend it on this. And, you know, whose decision should that be? Let's press on here, Ben.
Yeah.
We got some other current legislation that's
That's right. So we have a couple items here that have just, again, been impacted. We've hinted on some of them are water. So we've got put three bills on here. House Bill 3372A, Senate Bill 1153, and Senate Bill 999. And so all of these, again, have impacts on the ag industry that will be felt throughout it. And, you know, there's a lot of complexity to them. I mean, water is a cornerstone, but I think, again, as you all have touched on multiple times, it's regulations coming from folks or ideas, organizations that aren't as familiar maybe with the ground impacts that this will have on those industries. Yeah, again, we're seeing, you know, the water usage with permitting certain exemptions for certain types of farms, again, picking winners and losers, all those things, especially, you know, Senate Bill 99 looking at modifying worker camp and impacting houses, opportunities that are part of compensation used, and, you know, creating a stable workforce and creating sets of extra regulations that impede ability for farmers and employers to provide things like that. So again, making it, again, harder on the industry. But this is
go back for half a second real quick. So Senate Bill 999, that's my bill, right?
Love that bill.
We've been trying to figure this out. And if you even went back to your previous list where you talked about, you know, the smoke and the heat. So we had a big wildfire season in the midst of COVID. We were under executive order, executive rule, I would say at the time. And ultimately the governor said, hey, let's figure this out. We had a gentleman that was working out, unfortunately, in a field that was there too long in the heat of the day and actually did pass. And we should take that serious. We should examine that. We should figure out how to ensure that that never happens again. At the same time, we went out and said, okay, well, let's send our OSHA out, and Oregon OSHA is going to go create rule to ensure that this never happens again. While they're out doing that, PCOON and the Oregon Law Center, this is absolute truth, went to OSHA and said, while you're doing that, you should look at the housing. And Oregon OSHA's response was, let's not conflate that right now, but we will do that next. Now, I don't understand how a state agency is responsive to special interest groups. If there had been a run of complaints from people living in the housing, if there had been some burden incident, something that triggered a response, that would make total sense to me. But instead, Oregon OSHA clicked heel, popped a salute, and said, we'll do that next. And what was promulgated through rule, what was put forward, what was, they went out and did the research on what the federal rules were and how we wanted to make sure we aligned with that, which totally makes sense. But then they compromised with themselves, right? So the special interest group said, we want 100 square foot per person. I don't remember the exact numbers, forgive me. But then, we compromised on 80. Well, we're at 60 now. So like 80 is a big move. And when you've established and spent millions of dollars to farm or to house your farm workers, to increase that capacity may sound like nothing, but instead of being able to bunk 3 people in a certain given space, now you got to go down to 2. Where does that third person sleep now? Well, you got to spend another $1.1 million to build another couple facilities to house the people. It is more burdensome than our universities face with their dorms. We have kids stacked 3 high in a dorm room that doesn't meet the requirement that we're forcing our temporary farm worker housing to meet. And that's a struggle for me to wrap my mind around. This permanent housing that the bill that I've got is talking about. We have single family houses on property that a foreman and manager for the most part are living in, and they don't fall under landlord tenant law because you're not putting it out to the market. You're not accepting applications. You're just allocating it to your worker. And at the same time, it is definitely not farm worker camp, right? It's not temporary. It's not seasonal. It's permanent housing. And so to require a rule, for example, one of the new rules put forward by Oregon OSHA for farm worker housing is you got to have a disposable mattress cover. I mean, it does not make sense that you have a disposable mattress cover in your year-round residence where your children are catching the bus to go to school. I want to be like families live in these units. Now, the special interest groups will tell you, some of these are trailers. Some of these are trailers, dilapidated, run down. And I will say, I have not seen a single one of those. In any tour I've been on, in any facility, I've not heard from anybody living in one of those that has raised a hand saying, I'm very concerned about the conditions I'm in. And I don't want to suggest that they don't exist. Right. But I've not seen them. Mm-hmm. And yet they come forward and they present that in committee as if that's the only housing that's out there. And they have certainly not come at our invitation to look at the housing that we're talking about. I mean, in some cases, this is a house that homesteader originally lived in. It has been upgraded, modified, kept in good shape over the years. They either built a new house that they moved to, or they moved across town to a different farm and thus had a house available and said, well, manager, foreman, why don't we at either no cost or much reduced rent offer you a place to live? And I specifically wanted to draft this legislation in concert with some special interests from our perspective, Oregon Farm Bureau and fruit growers and people that do have this consideration, because Hood River has a terribly expensive housing market. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to live if you're not living in that subsidized unit from your employer? Right. You won't be able to live in town. You're going to have to move out of town. We're going to put you on the road. We're going to uproot your kids. We're going to send you to a different school because you can't afford to live in the Dalles or Hood River or Mosier. Like, these are expensive places to live if you're not in that subsidized unit. And yet you also can't accommodate these new farm worker, farm camp rules as they could pertain to a single family permanent residence.
Right, right. This is all a part of the nanny state as well. And I think it's an insult to our farm workers. They are not stupid people. They know how to get around. They know how to manage their lives. If it's an inadequate housing, they'll go. They've got networks. They'll go find a place where there's better housing that suits them and their family, or makes more sense economically. So to pretend that the legislature has to run their lives is an insult. And I get tired of the insults that we put on people.
And again, though, the only counter argument is that you're a racist.
Right.
We're slave owners and slumlords.
Yes.
I mean,
But
honestly,
it's nuts. Like, how many of us have lived in homes
Right.
throughout our time here in Oregon that didn't have air conditioning? I have lived in a home with no air conditioning.
I've never
Grew
had air
up in a house,
conditioning.
Right?
yeah.
I don't now. I never have.
It gets 107 degrees
I
in the
open the
Dalles,
windows,
Oregon.
Turn on the fan. Sleep under the sheet, not the
right.
blankets.
That's right.
But thank you. Like, honestly, like I think a lot of Oregonians can relate to the fact that
Right.
we don't have every luxury under the sun,
Right.
every accommodation that can exist. And yet we're going to force our farmers to provide it to people in some of these cases that are there for a season, there for a window. And I'm not
And yet
saying
some of my employees will show up when it's 90 degrees outside with sweatshirts on. I mean, honestly, my employees are adults. They dress themselves. They're capable of taking care of themselves. And I have to thank Senator Bonham for this bill, because as a farmer who has houses that are rental houses, this is me in a catch-22 because I'm a landlord tenant. But my landlord tenant laws, if I were to rent to one of my employees, I am caught in this because it's now seen as a farm worker camp simply because they are my employee. Well, that's dumb. I can't go into my employee's house. I mean, now do I only rent to people who work at Intel? Do I now ask people who they work for? I can't do that. That's a violation of landlord-tenant law. You can't do that. So I'm caught in the middle. And I can't go into my employee's house that I've rented them and say, okay, do you have a mattress cover? Did you wash your clothes together last night, or did you wash them separately?
Yeah, did you remember to run the rinse cycle in
Did you
between?
run the rinse cycle in between? I mean, I can't do that because I wouldn't do that if I rented to somebody who works for US Bank. So we are very much caught in a COT-22 because of government overreach and OSHA deciding that they are God when it comes to housing. And the funny thing about this is we had a bill having to do with housing for baseball players who were getting housing as a part of their compensation package. And we were doing an exemption for them for this compensation package. And I went, but wait a minute, housing is a part of their compensation package. So they're getting worker housing. Are they going to fall under OSHA or worker housing? Because technically it's worker housing. So we're traveling nurses. So are engineers that come to work for Intel for 6 months, and Intel provides them housing. Where is Oregon OSHA going to draw the line on this? And I wish Oregon OSHA would answer that, or D.O.G.E would answer that question for us, because right now they seem to think they have authority over everybody's housing if it's provided by an employer. That's what it should be.
I think that's it.
So thank you, Senator Bonham, for taking that one on.
So, yep.
Let's roll.
We've got
Wolves.
certainly the impact of wolves, which have been growing throughout Oregon. And right here, we've got a column regarding the impacts of confirmed depredation investigations. And so as we can see, these are not even just counting other investigations, they're the confirmed ones. And those are real financial dollars that impact the ranchers and then the taxpayers for the compensation that occurs and the breakups in the market and the chain supply. And, there's been a growth in wolves in Oregon, and we've seen them all throughout the West. And, there's, I think, a frustrating downplay of those negative impacts to certain parts of the state, or that it doesn't complicate or change things. And I think there's a lot of frustration that's felt throughout not just the legislature, but the entire state regarding this issue. So there you go, seeing that impact.
We probably won't get any. I mean, we're getting the wolf compensation at higher levels for the ranchers, thankfully. But I don't think we're going to see change in policy. Potentially, we'll get them off the endangered. They're still endangered, aren't they? Yeah. So hopefully, with Trump, we might see that change. But until some child is snatched and dragged away by the pack while waiting for the bus, honestly. I mean, I remember, 12, 15 years ago, visiting with commissioners in Wallowa County, and the people at that time, they had just started this wolf program, were afraid to have their kids at the bus stop because the wolves were around, Wow.
Yep.
So they're a dangerous animal.
So we like to end the show with a great game. There's one in particular that's favorite of mine is where does Oregon rank? And so these are going to be some questions on agriculture and impacts that we've got here. Some of them are a little more lighthearted since I felt like there was a little heaviness that we've done throughout this show.
Ben, this is out of order. We normally start with this. I'm so thrown off.
See, I heard that, but when I bring it in, I like to end on a little bit of a higher note. But
It's been a mixed bag for me. You guys, I have done really well or really poorly. So let's see.
Let's go with our first
There's
one
fabulous gifts and prizes.
here. Yes, right. Yeah. Which Oregon county is the top ag producing county by percentage of the product produced?
Top by percentage of product produced.
So for the state's whole picture of what gets produced.
Measured by volume of product or dollar value of product?
My
Which
understanding
county
is,
produces the most? Which is the biggest ag county?
The biggest ag county. I gotta guess. Are we locked in? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna throw mine out. I'll go first. We'll rotate. I'm gonna say it's Lynn County.
I really have no idea. I was going to go east, maybe to Ontario.
Malheur County.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Greater Idaho anyway, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's not fair because I know the answer to this one because I like ag statistics.
What's the answer?
It's Marion County.
It's Marion County.
Yeah,
That's right.
Believe it or
Representative.
not.
Oh, my
it's
gosh.
Marion.
Marion County.
Did you
It
forward
is.
this presentation to her before?
No, I
Just
know
fact
my
check.
ag
Yeah.
stats.
Well,
right.
I'm going to take second place on that. Lynn County is right next door.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right. That's pretty darn close. I'm a
Well,
way,
grass seed
way hard
prices have
third.
tanked, so not this year.
So now our next one. Where does
Ooh.
Oregon rank nationally in wolf population?
I'm ready.
I would say maybe third.
I was going with 3 too.
You can have the same answer.
I'm going with 3.
I will say not third.
Well, that's right, Senator. It is not third.
I was going to say seventh.
Seventh is a good guess, actually. So we're sitting at ninth.
Okay.
The estimation of 178 wolves, but it's been a fast growth.
In case you're wondering how I bet with my kids and my wife, that's how I do it.
I think that's the strategy on Price is Right.
Hey, we walk into the basketball game. They're like, I bet you Michael Jordan scores 49 points. And I said, I bet you he won't.
There you go. So this last one here, probably I think a lot of you will do well on this one. Where does Oregon rank nationally in Christmas tree production?
You're first.
Number 1.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, I think I'll just say second just to be contrarian.
There we go.
It's first, though.
It is first.
Yeah.
Providing 33% of the Christmas trees in the United States.
Which is super cool. So we didn't put this slide up, but I think these are fun stats. 96% of farms are family farms, 35,547 Oregon farms, 430 acres in average size. 90% of farms are small farms, 15.2 million acres of farmland, 42 billion in overall economic impact, 531,000 jobs. If you look at our top commodities, this one's fascinating too. Nurseries.
Nurseries, number 1.
Nurseries, number 1.
Number 1.
Cattle, number 2.
Yep.
Hay, number 3.
You got it.
Milk, 4th.
Yeah.
Grass seed.
This year. Well, we'll see what happens next.
Wheat.
Yeah.
Grape.
And we'll see what happens next year.
Potatoes.
Sanchez might text that one out of oblivion.
Onion, blueberries. Christmas trees is our 11th, despite the fact we're first
Yeah.
in the nation in Christmas trees,
our
it's our 11th largest.
It's because fake trees are taking over.
So here we go. Here's my question. And Ben, you're in on this one. name, and we're going to just go until you get one wrong. So we'll start with Ben. He's going to name where we are number one in production, and then we'll work our way around. So commodities where we're number one.
Well, I know the hazelnut.
Hazelnut. Boom. He's got one. He's on the
took
list.
the easy way
did.
out.
Let's see if we've got
Blueberries.
not. We are not number one
no,
in
we're
production in
number
the
two.
nation. So Rep Scharf, our farmer,
we're
the
number
one
two.
with the most street cred in this
Vermont's
conversation.
number one.
Uh-oh.
True. Number one in the nation?
Yeah, we are
We're
number
supposed
one.
to be
We got
number one in the
about
nation?
we got 9 or 10 of these. 10 of these.
We do a lot of. We have cranberry bogs. Cranberries.
Cranberry
No?
bogs is a wonderful guess. No,
Thank you.
Ben, can you get a second one? You're the only one that got one right.
Carrot seeds?
Carrot seed. No.
Ah, dang.
Well, you guys tried, and I'm proud of you for trying.
Grass seed.
Grass seed. What kind of grass seed?
Tall fescue.
Fescue.
Tall
And?
fescue. Perennial.
Ryegrass. Yep.
Perennial ryegrass.
We're also rhubarb.
Number
Number one in the nation in rhubarb.
I've heard that one before.
Wow.
Crimson clover.
Yeah.
Orchard grass.
No, it's just not grass.
Red clover. Sugar beet seed. And white clover
But
seed.
you can't grow sugar beet seed in Jackson County anymore. It's GMO.
Now I'm
Just
pretty
saying.
sure we are number one in peppermint oil, also, but that didn't show up.
It's not on the list. I'm not saying that we're not. I can't deny it, but I can tell you it's not on the list.
At least that's what the peppermint farmer told me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Probably told you that.
Great conversation. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again. I don't know what's next. We're talking about, I think, doing a Department of Corrections coming up.
Department of Corrections, we have Fish and Wildlife coming up, and I'm working on a public safety one as well.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look forward to that, and we'll see you back here soon.
All right.
Thank you.
you.